How do Fright Clubbers celebrate Valentine's Day?
With doomed romances, naturally.
How else? Welcome.
I'm Hope Madden.
And I'm George Wolf. We're from madwolf.com, and welcome to our Fright Club podcast, especially for Valentine's Day. Not Hearts and Flowers.
No, indeed.
But doomed romances, some of our favorites, and there's some good ones. Maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. Hopefully we can turn you on to something new. And by the way, first off, thank you for all the great feedback. We love it, and keep it coming. Last week we talked about some of our favorite horror reboots, and we got some great feedback, great ideas on some we missed, especially from Craig.
Yeah, he has, I'm going to say, some unusual taste. Well, one, I think, is he really liked the Hills Have Eyes remake. That would be Alexandre Aja, who did that great French horror film that we love, High Tension, yeah, which was awesome. And then he remade the old Wes Craven film, The Hills Have Eyes, and Craig thought that was maybe an oversight not to have mentioned, and that is pretty popular, I have to admit. But then the other one, I love his other recommendation, because what a weird movie. The Crispin Glover version of Willard.
Yes, and we love... Crispin is actually coming to town here. We're based in Columbus, Ohio. He's made a couple of personal appearances, and we've got to see him and hear him up close.
I got to interview him one time, too, which was like the coolest thing ever.
Different kind of guy.
Yeah.
And his take on Willard was different. But yeah, thank you, Craig. Great feedback, and we always love to keep the conversation going on Twitter. Anytime you can find us at Mad Wolf. That's MADDWOLF.com. But on to this week's Fright Club podcast, and just for the holiday, doomed romances. So where do you want to start?
I want to start with one of my favorite movies ever.
I shouldn't have had to ask. I knew where you were going to start, because
and not enough people have seen it. So we're
not that you haven't tried, because on our Fright Club live events here in town, when we do the once a month, we spotlight a horror movie. Have we done it twice?
We've done it once, but we're likely to do it again. We at the Drexel Theater the last Saturday every month, and we have covered this one before because we love it so much. It's The Loved Ones.
Will you go to the dance with me?
Sorry, Lola. I'm going with Holly. Hi, this is Brent. Leave a message.
Brent's done this before. He's always turned up.
I'm going to stab Holly in the heart, just like you did to me.
Yes, The Loved Ones from 2009, and it has a bit of a love theme because it's all based around that special time in a young person's life, which is prom night.
Oh, yes. And, and poor Brent, Lola asks him to the dance. He's not a bad dude, but he says no to Lola because he has a steady. And that turns out to be a bad decision that he's made. And you know what? I don't know whether I think the doomed romance is between Lola and Brett or between Lola and her dad.
Yeah, it gets wrong. Because as you heard in the trailer there, she has revenge on her mind, especially she doesn't like that Brent, this year the object of her affections, has another girlfriend, and as you heard, she has some bad things in mind, not just to his girlfriend, but to Brent, to make him come around to her way of thinking and her dad's way of thinking, and it ends up Brent is held captive, back at their place, and he has some bad things done to him, and he finds out that he's not the first.
No.
This has happened before, and daddy and daughter have a special relationship going on, especially, and the mom...
Bright eyes,
they call her, and her eyes are not bright, and I'll tell you what, and you don't even know if it's her mother or just the dad's companion, for lack of a better word, but there are some weird things in this house. But the other part of this is there's also some humor in it because there's another couple that goes to the dance that they kind of focus on. It's Brent's friend. Mm-hmm. Brent's friend who gets the courage up to ask out this weird, moody goth girl.
Yep.
And they're funny. They go to the dance and they have some funny things happen. And so it not only is there some comic relief in that other couple, but there's also some comic relief inside the horror house.
Yeah, and I think, Sean Byrne, who is Australian, made this movie, wrote and directed it, did a magnificent job. But so much, and he did a magnificent job. It looks great. The framing is great. There's a scene of this pink dress coming toward you at the end. It's just awesome. But almost all of it really hinges on Robin McLeavy, who plays Lola.
Yeah.
She's just wrong-headed and just fantastic.
She really is. And and so is the guy whose name escapes me that plays the dad.
Yeah.
But they have a really good chemistry between them, and it's the kind of movie, it certainly happened to us, after you've seen it, even once, and we've seen it more than once, but you just go back to it. You quote it at various times, and you remember
I
things.
I can't hear you.
Yeah.
You'll find yourself saying that.
Yeah, and in a really strangely, macabrely funny, is that a name? Macabrely? Funny. Ways, because the things they do, they get a drill, a power drill, and then there's a hammer. And then he turns the tables on him a little bit. Brandt manages to escape a little bit, and he's able to inflict a little bit of punishment and and then you find out some other things and some previous victims, and maybe
sort of
are they still alive?
Glittery carnage mess.
It is.
Yeah,
it's
great. It's a great movie.
Somebody, and I wish I could remember the entire quote, and I wish I could remember who did it, but I've seen one quote about it where something like Psycho meets 16 Candles or something.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Is that what it is?
16 Candles.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, and that's closer because the family is so weird, and it is 16 Candles because it's got that glittery, dress up and special time for the prom kind of thing going on, and then there's some serious torture. So it's one that I think the people that know it appreciate it and really know that it takes a place on a lot of lists, no matter what list you're doing, of recent horror movies. But the people that don't know it, that's what we're here to change, I guess.
You need to get to know this movie. You really do. If you're a fan of horror films, you need to get to know The Loved Ones.
Yeah. And it's, again, it was 2007. And it pops up. You'll see it on not only our list, but every now and then we're looking at lists of horror movies, and for one reason or another, somebody points to it as one that was forgotten. In fact, I remember when we put it on our showing, when roster, we did it, sure. we heard from a couple of people that, The Loved Ones. Yeah. I love The Loved Ones.
Yeah.
So it's out there. It has its fans. But for some reason, it just hasn't maybe gotten the worldwide acclaim that maybe it should.
Yep. So watch it. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, especially for Valentine's Day. Definitely a doomed romance. And you're right, that lead actress,
Robin McLeavy, a magnificent.
She's so great. And what have we seen her since then?
She's in that TV show Hell on Wheels, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. We don't watch a lot of TV, unfortunately. So if you bring up a good TV show, we're going to take your word for it. We haven't seen it because we're busy watching movies like this.
Right.
So The Loved Ones is a great doomed romance. And let's get another one.
Yeah, we want to go to one of the all-time great, Chan-wook Park. Oh my God, everything he does is magnificent. And this is his first take on vampire film and on romance. It's called Thirst.
Time of death, 3:31 p.m.
Yeah, this is great. Not only do we love him in just about everything, but actually the roots of the story go back centuries, really. It's that love triangle type of thing that you've seen in The Postman Always Rings Twice. Actually, you saw it come up again last year, I think, with Elizabeth Olsen, and Oscar Isaac had a movie called In Secret, and it's based on a novel from, I think it's the 1800s, about a love triangle, and one couple they get together and they decide to bump off somebody else. So that's the kind of root of the story, but Thirst takes it an entirely different way, and that is a vampire genre type.
Because before we get into the love triangle at all, the main character, first of all, the love triangle story is almost always told from the point of view of the female, the wife. And in this one, it is not. It's told from the point of view of the other man. And in this case, he starts off a priest. He's a priest, and he goes in for a procedure to cure a disease, and he dies, but doesn't. So he comes back. He's a vampire. And then also falls in love with his ill friend's wife. I mean, it's really weird. It's a very weird film, and it's a Korean film, and there's a lot of sort of unusual comic elements to it as well. But it's just gorgeous the way it's filmed. It's just so sumptuously filmed. And Chan-wook Park, if you're not familiar, well, you should be. But he's the director behind Old Boy, the entire Vengeance trilogy.
The original.
That's right, the
should
original,
say.
the masterpiece, Old Boy.
Yes, the one that you should see. Forget the other one.
Right, and Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance, and also an unseen and an underseen English language film he made a few years ago called Stoker, which was great. But this is his only vampire movie, and certainly his only real romance, I would think.
One of the other cool things about it is because he starts before he's turned, he's a priest. There's some real interesting contrast between what he's doing to his victims and a guilt that he feels about it. In terms of, he mentions a few times about praying for me, don't pray for me. He has pity on his victims, and think there's a real back and forth between what he's doing and his calling, so to speak. Because now he has a new calling,
right?
And it's in stark contrast to his old one.
And it's just, it's an interesting combination of elements, because that idea, the conflicted vampire, that's not that really unusual. It's done really well here, but I mean, it's a pretty common trope for vampire films. It's the connecting all of it up with this, long-standing old love triangle with the meddling mother-in-law story. That's just it's a weird movie in a good way, but it's very odd.
Yeah, and it is, as you mentioned, it's visually arresting, visually striking, especially when there are many scenes when he's covered in bandages.
Yes.
Remember his face?
Yeah.
It's almost like picture the old Invisible Man movies, where when the Invisible Man, is wrapped in bandages, so then you can actually see the outline of his face. This is kind of like that. In some of the scenes, he's walking around with a hat and bandage, and I think a cigarette.
Yeah.
At some times.
And it's funny because if you're used to Park's films, they're very punishing. I mean, he's got a phenomenal visual style, but it's not like this. This is very fluid and poetic and sort of just lovely and then punctuated by these really unusual images.
Yeah, it's not like it's a great word, punishing, of say Old Boy, because that is punishment. Not here. Yeah, you're right. It's very, very
softer. It's kinder.
Softer and almost, you don't want to say gentle, but it kind of is.
Certainly by comparison.
By comparison, but even when he's stalking his victims and interacting with his victims, there's a certain, romance about it, which some of the old Dracula movies, there always has been.
Sure.
Very homoerotic kind of thing, or erotic in a sense when he's, jumping on his victims. But that comes into play here as well. And it's certainly not one of his, like you said, very extremely brutal type violence. But it still is a vampire movie. So blood is spilled. But it's a very interesting take where you combine those two genres, the old love triangle and the vampire.
Yeah, but we want to move on to another one of my favorites. And this might be one that a few more people are familiar with, and it's an American film that I just loved called May.
If you can't find a friend, make one.
What you reading about?
Amputation. You have a beautiful neck. I love your hands. You have really beautiful legs. I love your tattoo. I need more parts.
So this is one, Lucky McKee is the writer-director, and he made another one of the films that George knows I love so dearly, which is not a romance at all. It's called The Woman.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. You want to go back to, you want to talk about brutal.
But we'll do a whole other show on The Woman someday. But it doesn't fit in with today. But May was one of his first films, and it's a story, it's kind of little, Solons-esque sort of, it's the gawk, and they really mind that. They don't turn away from that, and you're with her, and every embarrassing, socially maladjusted, weird thing that she does. And May is played by Angela Bettis. She could not possibly be any better. She's magnificent. You just love her. And then you just ache for her to actually find someone who loves her back. And she has two possibilities in the course of the film. One is Jeremy Sisto, who is the boy that she loves. He's perfect. And then the other is her coworker.
Yeah, but we got to talk about Jeremy Sisto, because to us, that's not his name.
What's his name?
His name is My Foot Hurts. And that's because he's the guy. If you saw the old movie Clueless with Alicia Silverstone, he is one of her classmates, and he keeps trying to get out of class and go to the restroom or the nurse out in the hall. And his only reason for doing that is, my foot hurts. And that's what he says. So from then on, at least to us, we'll see him because I think he had a TV show for a while. Didn't
he might have. He was in 13. He was in the film 13.
He was in 13, but I don't know. He had CSI Schenectady or one of those.
Know.
But I'd see him on the commercials, and I'd say, "Hey, it's my foot hurts." So apologies to Mr. Sisto, but your name is My Foot Hurts, and he's one of the
love
potential
interest.
boyfriends. Yeah,
right.
And as you hear in the trailer, it's almost like a Frankenstein type of vibe.
Yes, very much. And you can sort of see it coming on for a long time. She works in a veterinary hospital along with Anna Faris, who is her other love interest, who is Anna Faris, who, obviously a comic, actress that you know in a lot of things. She is, again, just spot on perfect in this movie. She's just vampy and adorable and hilarious.
I can see that.
Oh,
yeah.
She's great. She's great. And she brings so much energy to the film. And so eventually, the longer you get into it, the more you realize that May is not just a wallflower. May is bone deep weird. She's weird and things are not going to pan out for her. And she just doesn't know why. So eventually she decides to make her own friend. So it's not really until this really quite tender and heartbreaking moment in the film where things just change. And it's kind of like a coming of age a little bit. Although when she comes of age, she starts collecting body parts to make herself a friend. It's a wonderful movie, though. I mean, it's just magnificent.
Yeah, that was from 2002. And that was one, I'll be honest, that really slipped through the cracks because I was not aware of that one at all.
Yeah, it's a great movie, though. It's good. It's worth seeing. And there's another one that not a lot of people have seen that's really worth checking out, and it's called The Signal.
What's the matter with you? I turned the TV on, and there it was.
1 out of 2 people just started killing each other. They just decided to kill people.
Listen to me. It's a lie. The signal, it's a trick.
Yeah, The Signal from 2007, and as you kind of got the idea from the trailer, there's a little bit of a poltergeist where there's something in the TV.
Well, there's a signal, and it's funny because you kind of have to go with it. It's back in the time where people would listen to CD Walkmans, so that's. Hey,
I remember that.
So and the whole time you just wonder, will Maya and Ben? Will they reunite or will they be kept apart because the signal that is being transmitted across people's phones and their TVs and their radios is making people crazy, making them insane, which is we've talked about the film The Crazies before. Yep. This is very much along the same line. It's really fun. It's violent. It's nutty. It's insane. And the two lovers are separated at the beginning of the film. And so the whole point is, are they going to get back together? And when they do, if they get back together, will they both still be sane? And so, that's your journey. But the main reason to watch this is Maya's husband, who is not her lover. It is her husband. He's played by A.J. Bowen, who's in a lot of horror movies and rarely this hilarious. He's hilarious. He's an exterminator. And he can take a lot of punishment, and he's just very funny. In the middle act is a bunch of people who you don't know. Do they have? They refer to it as the crazy. Do they have the crazy? Do they not? Are they just survivors? Are they just weird? What's going on here? It's so much fun, especially the middle part, which really has very little to do with the doomed lovers, but except that it's her ex-husband who's trying to make sure that they stay apart, and he's gathering the resources that he needs to do so.
Now, would you categorize this as one of those afraid of technology type horror movies where, because that was a time with the Walkman and maybe there was some new technologies coming in. Is that one of those? That's the theme behind it?
A little bit, which is a very common theme in Asian horror films. Yeah. And I do think so, but it's also very, it's a zombie film without zombies, basically. But instead of it being a fear of infection, which is what most zombie films are, it is a worry. It's a worry about technology and how technology is affecting us. But it's really funny, and it's quite bloody. And you know what? Crazy people can take a beating. That's what I learned from this movie. And duct tape has a lot of uses. I learned that as well.
Remember that, kids. All right, so we move from a couple of your favorites to one of mine. And actually, I don't believe this is one of yours, so we can talk about that. But we go back to 1987 for the original Hellraiser.
A box?
Not just any box. It opens doors. Doors to the pleasures of heaven or hell.
We'll tear your soul apart.
I love that. Pinhead will tear your soul apart. Pinhead, we didn't really get to meet him. I wouldn't say we met him, but he came to town a few years ago at the Horror Hound Festival, and we got a picture of him signing autographs.
Yeah, we did. I think this literally what happened. I turned around and said, "Oh my God, it's Pinhead."
He hadn't heard that before.
No.
Doug Bradley, the actor.
And he had a here in Ohio. There's a famous penitentiary in Mansfield, and he was wearing a Mansfield Penitentiary T-shirt, which gave him extra points in our book. Yeah,
and he had a pretty long line, or we might have gotten an actual picture. But anyway. He's the lead Cenobite, and I have a lot of affection for this movie, and you really don't. And why is that?
I don't know, but I'm just realizing right now in this particular season that it's kind of the 50 Shades of Grey for horror fans, isn't it?
Yes, and you know what? And that's the thing, because I defer to you a lot of times, especially you're much more knowledgeable about the history of horror, and you see them all, and I don't. But this one is interesting because it came out, as I'm sure you realize, at a time of the teenage slasher movies.
Yeah, height, the 1980s, the height of the slasher.
And it took it in a very adult, a little bit of that S&M direction. And this was totally different at the time because, it wasn't just kids. These were adults, and they were playing with some stuff. And that's at the root of it. And I'm sure you probably know the story by now. There's the box that, if it's opened, can bring pleasures heavenly or pleasures hellish. And in this case, it's hellish because it releases the Cenobites, and they come looking. And what it is a woman is involved with. She's having an affair with
her husband's brother,
her brother-in-law. Yeah, and he is the one who's into all these extreme pleasures and all these Asian, tribal type of legends and everything. So he's seeking out these types of things. So he gets the box, he opens it. The Cenobites come and tear him up, and then she finds Then she goes back with her husband and a daughter, the young teenage girl, and they're in a house where the brother-in-law was killed, where he was opening up that box. So his remains, so to speak, are like in the floorboards and everything like that. And long story short, it gets discovered that if the wife lures men up there to that room, kills them, spills blood in the room, that blood more and more will bring the brother-in-law back to life. And even though by today's standards, the special effects aren't good, back then, when you saw him in various stages of undead, it was pretty interesting.
For me, one of the, aside from the Cenobites, who are top to bottom awesome. I mean, every single one of them. That one. I mean, all of them. They're so cool. But the other thing that makes the movie work as well as it does for me is Claire Higgins, who plays the wife. She's just unseemly.
Oh, she is.
She's very weirdly turned on by this pulpy mass of
definitely so.
It's
and that's
creepy.
Part, yes,
yeah,
exactly.
It's part of what works really well.
Yeah.
And as you've pointed out before, one of the reasons that you like it is because while there is a teenage girl in this movie, she's not just a mindless, vacuous, screeching death trap. She actually outwits everybody, the Cenobites and the humans who are trying to do bad.
Right, because what she figures out is that the Cenobites are not happy that a man that they originally captured, so to speak, has gotten away. So she figures that she can, once they get on her trail, she makes a deal with them that, hey, this guy got away from you. I can lead you back to him, and they want him back. So, yeah, you're right. She's not just screaming and running. She's thinking and trying to get out of it and making deals. And, at the time, not only was the S&M kind of theme certainly different, but so was that, because it was usually just screaming. Nothing against Jamie Lee Curtis. I love those types of movies, but this was different, and it certainly was bloody.
It was bloody
for its time, yeah. Because when he's up in those chains, and that's the other thing about it, that just the sound, you would hear the chains rattling, when they opened it up, and that the Cenobites were coming, and because they are so very cool. Not just Pinhead.
No,
even though he's the only one that speaks. Yeah. Right? He's the only one that speaks. But there's the other guy, like you said, that then there's the woman and the great big blobby
sluggy
one,
guy,
sluggy one. Yeah. And they're just very cool.
They are cool.
And the very interesting thing is we just heard that this is we just talked about reboots last week. This is going to be rebooted by Clive Barker himself, right?
He's writing it, and as far as I know, they haven't really determined who's directing it. It may be him. He may just be producing it. They haven't really landed on a director, I believe, just yet. And it's going to be an origin story. They're going to take us back to the Devil's Island, where
the origin of the box and everything else.
Yep. And so that should be kind of interesting if there's a good director, I think.
Yeah, because it goes without saying they have a world of technological advancements at their disposal.
Yeah.
But I hope they don't go too far with that.
And to be honest with you, none of the sequels have been any good.
No,
there have been 5 or 6. Yeah, they've all
give you that.
They've all been pretty bad.
We argue back and forth about this sometimes because this is one of the ones that I really like and you really don't. But I'll give you that. I'm not talking about the sequels. I just mean the first one here. I think it still works. And I guess the doomed romance, if we're going to say, is between the wife and the brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Because any romance that she promises after that is just as a means to an end of spilling blood. And because she gets into it too.
Yeah.
When she lures those guys up there and she really has a little bit of bloodlust about it.
She does.
Not only to what the blood will do to her lover, bring him back a little bit more, but just the fact of killing them. She gets into it.
No, she does.
She really does,
Yeah.
even though she's at first, repulsed by the sight of him. Hellraiser, definitely still one of my favorites. And that's 5 of our favorite doomed romances.
You can check them out. Actually, it's funny because I wrote for Screen Relish. We write for screenrelish.com, and I did something this weekend called a Saturday Screamer. I do one about once a month, and because it's Valentine's Day, I wrote up May. So you can see a full review of the film May and a trailer at screenrelish.com right now. Yeah,
and if there's any of these that we missed, maybe please let us know. And also, you know what? Take a side here. Who's right? Who's right on Hellraiser? Is it a really good one, or as Hope says, not so much? So I'd be interested to know because that's one that we agree on an awful lot of movies. We really do. Once in a while, we have a disagreement, and this is one of them. Just just a little bit. It's not like you hate it.
No, I don't. And I love a good villain. And Pinhead is a great villain. And really, so's the woman. She's great as well. She's creepy and great. I just have never been that fond of the film.
Okay.
And this screechy teenage girl's name. Kirsten? I think it's Kirsten.
Yeah, so, all right. So let us know your thoughts on Hellraiser and anything else. It's easy on the voice feedback line. That's 304-837-2278.
That's over at Golden Spiral Media, the lovely people who put on our podcast. Or if you want to go to their website, goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback, then you can try submitting a feedback response. You just upload a pre-recorded audio file using the SpeakPipe widget to record a contribution. Comes right to us, and we'll play it on the show next week, and we'll talk about whatever it is you had to say.
Oh, you bet. We love it. So, and of course, as we said before, keep it going. We love to converse back and forth on Twitter, which is at MaddWolf, MaddWolf. So, happy Valentine's Day.
Indeed. So we will talk to you again next week. Until then, I'm Hope Madden.
And I'm George Wolf. Stay frightful, my friends.